Alright, hello BYU Cougar fans. Welcome to the Blue Cougar Football daily podcast of what's on my mind as far as BYU football goes. As you can see, I apologize. This has been a bad week for podcasting for me, but I do have some things on my mind that I want to put out there, especially some BYU Utah stuff. But before getting to that, over the weekend, last weekend, with the bye, I thought a little bit more about a topic some others have discussed, specifically the Cougar Center podcast, about the Texas win this year versus the Oklahoma win in 2009. Which game was a better win for BYU? And I had joined the discussion a little on Twitter and said it was definitely OU. That was before the Texas game. And no matter what happens in the Texas game, that OU would be a bigger win. And I still feel that way. I don't even think it's much of a question. There's just so much. The Oklahoma team that BYU played in 2009 was so much better than this Texas one. There was all kinds of other reasons making that Oklahoma team and beating them in the season opener so much bigger. I mean, they were ranked number 3 in the nation to start off. So, and they had just played in the national championship game the year before. They were fully expected to be back in the national championship discussion. Had the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Sam Bradford, and a top 10 defense. That Oklahoma defense was nasty that year. They showed it the next 2 weeks by shutting out their opponents, each of those 2 games. And so Texas this year, I mean, they're kind of an outside shot at the national championship, everyone feels. Hence, only being 15th in the nation, and they returned a lot of starters, so that has everybody excited, and they should have been good, but I mean, I think the rankings reflect, accurately that Oklahoma was a better team, and so beating them would be a bigger win. But the argument I kind of got back from Cougar Center podcast was that right now BYU is in desperate need for a marquee win, and beating Texas, especially the way BYU did, would be a marquee win and get BYU back in the national discussion, or at least get some national attention to BYU, which it did, which I like. But at the same time, go back to 2009. I mean, BYU was a 22-point underdog also, and although we had back-to-back 10-plus win seasons, that's when we were coming off 11 wins in 2006, 11 wins in 2007, 10 wins in 2008. Even with all that success, finishing nationally ranked all 3 of those years, BYU was really in a situation where they needed to make a statement to start 2009. As you recall, 2008, all 3 of those losses were pretty embarrassing for BYU. The blowout at TCU, the blowout to the Utes as they went on to the BCS when BYU was supposed to be the BCS buster that year, and then losing to an Arizona team in the bowl game by double digits, and a team that BYU had beat really soundly the year before. And again, BYU was 10-2 going into that game. Arizona was 7-5, so BYU was expected to win that game. Easy. So BYU nearly dropped completely out of the polls, still ended in the very low 20s. And a lot of people thought BYU was lucky to be ranked in the preseason top 25s in 2009. We had lost a lot of respect in 2008 because of the way we lost. Nobody cared that we had lost to 2 top 10 teams and then lost in the bowl game because we just weren't really motivated very much. The season was already a disappointment because it was BCS or bust. But anyways, I mean, BYU was in a situation, not too different than right now, needing to make a big statement on the national stage to get some respect back. And so I think hands down that Oklahoma win was better than this Texas win. That's not trying to take anything away from it. I still really am excited about what BYU did. Very happy that we beat the Longhorns and did so in record fashion. I mean, it's definitely a game I'm going to remember for a long, long time. And I just loved it. But when we start talking which game was the bigger game, I think it's just very clear that it was Oklahoma. Okay, now moving on, getting to some rivalry talk here. First, let me address the Spencer Hadley suspension. I hate it. Hate everything about it. Except for the fact that BYU is sticking to its guns and its standards, and that's something that we have to admire and have to support. I mean, I feel bad, terrible that he did something like that. He's going to regret for the rest of his life, and that could be costly. Hadley is a great player, underrated. If he were an inch and a half, 2 inches taller and 15 to 20 pounds heavier, he'd be getting a lot of NFL talk as well. But I think he could still, stick on as a free agent, maybe late round draft pick. Well, probably definitely a free agent now, since he's going to miss almost half the year. But he's real smart, real good football player, and he's given a lot to the BYU success last year and even the year before. So I'm going to miss him on the field and just hope that he can get everything right and that nothing too terrible happens on the field, so he doesn't have to add that guilt to his shame. But I think I'm optimistic that BYU will be okay. He is playing in the middle. That's probably better for BYU that he was playing in the middle. It's easier to fill a hole in the middle, I think, than to not fill it. Than to fill it from the outside linebacker. So that gives some protection, some added security. And I don't know too much about Tyler Beck. Possibly Manoa Pekula will move back to middle linebacker, where he had been the last 2 years, and had gotten some raving reviews out of camp. And yeah, it's time for someone to step up. This is what football's about, what rivalries, legends are made of. So someone can step up here and make a big difference and really make a name for themselves. Lead BYU to victory. Speaking of victory, I'm not so sure Utah wants to win this year. It's really strange what's happening. They're getting really full of themselves, I guess, with this whole Pac-12 thing, because they are putting out a lot of bulletin board material. Maybe it's not intentional, but they're saying things that are very easy to be spun by the media. And as we learned last year with Mike Leach's quote, players, they're happy to take a quote as disrespectful and use it as bulletin board material, as motivation for the game. And so I don't know what's going on in Kyle Whittingham and his players' minds, but they're adding a lot of fuel to the fire. And so I mean, I don't think BYU needed any more motivation for this game. And so I don't know what they're trying to do, but it could really come back and bite them in the rear on Saturday. All right, another aspect of this game, I noticed fresh off the weekend, a bunch of people seemed really scared about playing Utah. Utah offense has been doing really well. Put up 48 points against Oregon State, 70 against Weber State, and led a pretty significant comeback against Utah State in the season opener. So some people are really terrified that, oh my goodness, Utah's offense is really good, ours is not so great, especially if we have to throw the ball. And this is not going to bode well for us. Well, let me just say this is a little bit of a deja vu. Texas looked really good, at least number-wise in their season opener. Over 700 yards of offense, 56 points, big play after big play, blah, blah, blah. What'd they do? They came into Provo. Our defense shut them down, kept them corralled. Things didn't get out of hand, and it went a long way. They were more physical, overpowering. That went a long way to BYU winning the game against Texas. So we got a little defense deja vu here. A team whose offense has looked pretty good to really good so far this year coming in, and our defense has the task of ending that hot streak. And so I think they're up to it. We got quite a few good, really good players on the defense. And those who haven't made a name for themselves already, they're doing so. Robertson Daniel and Sky Pove at the corners specifically. So, and besides, why spend the whole week worried and then dejected afterwards if we lose? I mean, let's try and be optimistic, have some fun this week leading up to the game. So then if BYU does in fact lose, that's one less week of misery that we've put ourselves through. And we can all use one less week of misery in our lives. Okay, one thing I've noticed doing the Remember the Rivalry series this week, if you haven't checked it out, go to the webpage. It's fun going back, looking at these games that BYU has beat Utah, and just to really be able to look at it with the 2020 hindsight vision to see how they shaped and molded the rivalry and have their role in it. And one thing I noticed this year doing it is BYU used to be a lot better in revenge games against Utah. In Lavelle Edwards' first 20 years, there were 2 revenge games, and BYU got revenge. First, Utah beat us in 1978, so coming back the next year, 1979, what does BYU do? They shut out Utah, 27-0. Look, you think you can beat us? Well, you can't beat us if you don't score. So take that. First time ever BYU won a shutout in this rivalry back in 1979. That's how BYU got revenge then. Then again, 10 years later, 1988, Utah had beat BYU. So coming back in 1989, BYU's looking for revenge. So what does Ty Detmer and company do? Oh, they put up 49 points in the first half. Finished with 70 points, most points scored by either team in the entire history of this rivalry for a single game. And Utah was just embarrassed beyond belief. Nobody cared after that game if Scott Mitchell was hurt or not. They knew BYU was going to destroy the Utes that day, no matter what. So, I mean, come on. I wish we could get revenge like that nowadays. Hoping for a real good revenge this Saturday. We need a big win and send those Utes packing for 3 years. Give them something to think about and never forget. Well, that's what I got on my mind. I mean, I've been putting other stuff out on Twitter, and I mean, obviously read the stuff on the site. That's got stuff that I don't talk about in the podcast, specifically for that reason. I'm not going to do double duty, but remembering the rivalry, score prediction contest, you can predict the score for the game, and if you're the closest, then I've got a really nice prize that will be sent to you. And also, very, very big, very exciting, doing a charity fundraiser. Got some old newspaper copies from 2009 of that Oklahoma win. Speaking of that game, that you can have for $20 a piece, and all the money will go to support a charity I'm very familiar with, I Ask International Aid Serving Kids. They do a lot of great work for children in Haiti and Dominican Republic, doing dental, going there and doing free dental work, paying for school and living expenses for those in poverty. Because school there is not like our public school system we have here. You definitely have to pay for school every year, and so get some kids education, and does a lot of great work. You can visit their site. I've got links on the page. Find that story there on the news page, and it's definitely worth it. And as I said, you're not just getting a good feeling in return. You're getting a BYU collector's item. Because as I said, that was the biggest win of BYU this century so far. So you want to get your hands on one of those. All right, thanks for listening. Go Cougars.